Welcome to Tech Bites with Dan Hafner, your gateway to the future of innovation and technology. Dive into the exciting world of software where cutting-edge tech meets creativity. Explore no-code solutions that empower businesses to thrive without traditional barriers. Hear inspiring stories from tech pioneers and industry leaders who are changing the game. Join us on Tech Bites and transform the way you think about technology and business.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Dan Hafner here, and I am joined by Adam Korga. We're going to talk a little bit about some very interesting stuff. There's a lot of things going on with the complexity of technology, but it's also getting simple, but it's also going crazy. Adam's been in the IT world for over 20 years. He's seen it all. He's been around for quite a bit of these transformations, all these things going on. So I decided to bring him onto the show to have some kind of some just maybe if you guys could be a fly on the wall for this one, I think you'd find a lot of value out of this, because he's worked with people as far as demystifying all the jargon and all the different just crazy complex stuff that a lot of us kind of deal with in this world from day to day. So I'm very interested to have him on the show. So I'm going to bring him in here in just 1 second. But as always, thank you all for joining. Thank you for listening to the show, watching the show, however you're consuming this. If you have just heard of the show and if you're new, welcome. Please go back and listen to some other episodes if you find them interesting. We have a lot of different content on this show. But if you are a senior and you've been around for a little while, welcome back, and keep sharing, keep reviewing, keep engaging with the show, because it's really, really helping us get a lot more popular. We've been going up and up the charts. It's been amazing to watch, and I just want to thank all of you listeners and consumers of the content here. Just before we get started, so with that being said, Adam, welcome to the show, man. How are you?
Hey, how are you? And well, I'm very good, and I'm happy to be here. And how are you?
Absolutely. He is joining us from Berlin, I believe.
Yes.
I always have a soft spot for. I'm not a fellow German. I'm like 50% German as far as my genealogy goes.
Don't worry, I'm also not German, so no problem.
Right. No, you did say that. You did mention that
Yeah,
before.
yeah, yes.
But anyway, just give us the quick view. I know I kind of give you a little bit of an intro, but just in your own words, give us the 30-second overview of what you do and who you are.
Okay, so like you said, I work for about 20 years in IT. Started as backend engineer in last couple of years, mostly so-called platform cloud. So the stuff nobody sees, but everybody complains when it stops working. In various scale, from software houses, freelancing, also corporations. And at some point, I started noticing patterns. And let's just say I have enough ego to start talking about this. And here I am. So I like to analyze, think about systems, about how it is organized, also in the, let's say, quasi-social aspects of that. But I also believe in learning from failure. So instead of focusing on another success story, I prefer to analyze what's going wrong in the industry, just as a source of the more tangible and learning experiences.
That makes sense. I mean, so let's start there, I guess. I had another thing I want to ask, but we can get to that in a second. But what is going wrong? I mean, what? So in specifically, you've had some experience in the software development world, correct? So what would you say? We're kind of in the middle of this. I think they call it the AI software war, right? It's all of these tools that are. You have Claude, you have ChatGPT, you have Grok, you have Gemini, you have all these different tools that is seemingly in this race to make software engineering and software development 100% robotic, as good as it can possibly be, right? What do you think are some of the inherent problems with that entire thing?
Well, that's a very interesting question, but I can think of three competing issues. One is another hype cycle. yeah, there is discussion if we are in a bubble, hype, and yada yada. But there is something. 25 years ago, we had web .com bubble. Now we have AI. Of course, a lot of good in the technologies and progress will come up from it, but there will be also some issues. Like during .com bubble, there were pets.com, and everything that had .com was suddenly a multi-million investment. But during that time, Amazon and Google started, so something appeared. Something like that happens right now. That's one thing. Second is that people really like to believe that it's something super new, that it would solve all the problems just because it's a new technology, and try to apply it to pretty much everything. While, like every other technology that happened and will happen, it is a set of great tools, but you need to understand what they can do, what they cannot do, what they cannot replace. And this finding limits of what they cannot do is still blurry. Let's say I like to think that I have a little bit of understanding what they cannot do, but hey, I'm just a person. But there is also most interesting aspect actually is related to the fact that entire industry is learning totally new business model. I recently had some conversation and wrote about that entire generation of management is learning totally new business model, totally new incentives. Everything they learned just went to trash. Like entire big tech entire generation of management in big tech was learned that high engagement, time spent in the system is the highest value they can have, because, well, if you look at social media, the more time somebody spends, the more money from advertisements there. In streaming portals like, I don't know, Netflix, Spotify, and so on, more time people spend, the more higher perceived value, so the lower churn and bigger and more audience, more subscribers. In AI, more time spent in the system means, one, much higher cost. Second, frustration because people don't want to have a chatty conversation, they just want answers. And revenue not necessarily increases because most of those subscriptions are flat, unless we're talking about some enterprise tools that are charging by the token, but that's still not that advanced. So ultimately, all entire system of metrics, how to measure success, needs to be redefined.
Interesting. Very cool. Well, I do want to take a quick second and just apologize to you and to any of the listeners who might be able to hear any of the background noise that's going on right now. It's snowing here where I'm at, and I have a neighbor who decides to do his entire driveway with a leaf blower.
Wow.
So yeah, and it's incredibly loud and incredibly annoying. And he just has to do it right now in the middle of doing this. So we'll see if we can edit it out, and maybe we'll even edit this part out. We'll see. But normally these mics pick up that pretty well. But just thought of it like, wow, this is really really bad timing for this.
Let's just say gods of live presentation and live demo kick in, so something can go wrong if will. So
yeah. Well, no, that's good. So, well, and another thing I wanted to ask you about too is, one of the topics I've seen that you talk about a little bit is this topic of digital transformation. And that's kind of one thing that software has that software does enable with companies, right? I've done this. I've helped several companies, kind of digitize their offline processes, maybe outdated paper things or spreadsheets even, into like a software tool or a way to like streamline things. So it's like a digitization, right? Now, I I have found, and I have seen stats all over the place. I can't really name any off the top of my head, that a lot of digital transformations fail, and a lot of times it can really be for reasons other than the technology, right? So, why is that? Like from your experience, do you have any insight to any of that at all?
But most of the failure, in my opinion, most of the failures in the technological world are not necessarily due to technology, so it doesn't surprise me. But to me, there is a mix of, on one hand, people don't necessarily understand what technology is. Like, I'm not sure about US, but in Europe there is a common problem of, for instance, understanding who owns the data, how to protect it, and yada yada yada. But on the other hand, forgetting that somebody who is at the beginning of the journey should not necessarily try to copy the biggest players in the industry. Like if you're opening on a e-commerce store, maybe copying everything that Amazon does is not the best idea for you for various reasons. So there is also about finding a balance of that. So from my experience, don't try to solve everything at once. Maybe go slowly and learn what you're doing. That applies to adopting any process also in person. Actually, it works for me.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's yeah, and I've talked about this with some other people. I think there's a, there's a lot of, no matter how advanced I think technology can become, there's always going to be human uh, error and human flaw in things, and that's kind of one thing that is never really escapable for us. Sometimes
Well,
is that we always kind of get in our own way, you know?
yeah, but at the end of the day, technology is built by humans. So if you look under the hood of the common mistakes, I'm recently doing a lot of research on that, so maybe I'm on automatic. But if you look under the hood, what's going on, you'll see that the mistakes are just, or technology just mimics how people think, how people do. So yes, it's very easy to come to conclude or to find at some point human element under all the layers and stuff, even if it's not the human element in the organization that tries to digitize, but the organization that created the tool, but there is still human element involved. So
Yeah.
you won't run away from that. And also, let's remember that there is even a law about suggesting something like that. It's called Conway's law, which pretty much says explicitly that every software will over time will have the architecture reflecting the organization structure.
Okay, can you repeat that again? Because that was actually going to be my very next question.
So
Was Conway's law?
Conway's law says that every software developed over time will have the architecture reflecting the organization that was developing. It's so that you have separate you probably would have microservice architecture, not necessarily because that's the optimal split, but because you had a couple teams and you needed to distribute the module between those teams. Over time, the organization changes the structure because somebody needed to be promoted, somebody left the company, and so on. And then those modules are moved because somebody needs to manage it, and so on. So it is visible in the software over time, and moreover, it's almost like a geological survey that the oldest, most legacy code is pretty much representing how the company looked 5 years or 10 years ago, and the newest modules represent how it looks like now.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, I think like, so there used to, I came from an agile type of environment where we used Jira and we had all the different,
Yeah,
stand-ups and all that kind of stuff.
sorry for
Is
laughing.
that starting to be a thing of the past? Is that starting to be like a dinosaur type of thing, or is that still useful today?
Oof, that's so. In my opinion, agile is and was and will be useful, but I like to talk about cargo cults in context of agile because that's another tool that we like to use as a buzzword without fully understanding what it is for. So depending who you ask, Agile provides different values. For instance, if you ask business people or management, it speeds development up, while we forget the basic meaning of the word, which is agile, which means swift, able to change direction. It's not fast. If you compare, I don't know, I like the analogy to mountain skiers. If you look at downhill, slalomists will never be as fast as downhill, but he will be much more agile and will be able to change direction.
Yeah.
And we keep confusing that. We have the ceremonies just because somebody said that we need to have ceremonies without fully understanding why do we even bother. And then there is also the conflict between different departments and different needs. As the bigger the organization is, the more likely you'll hit into something that I like the term water scramble, where planning needs to be in quarterly, yearly planning, and so on. So we need to predict everything. Then the development pretends that they do in Scrum, in Agile mode. And then the testing and release is back to the waterfall. So is it Agile? I wouldn't say so. But it's how it looks like.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I mean, if you think about like how fast you're able to go with AI now, it's like super agile. It's like you can go at the if agile was an improvement on like a waterfall approach, right, where you're like just like you said, you're dumping things annually or um quarterly. I mean, the the world of AI has sped up things so incredibly that it's like super agile. It's like super duper agile. You could change courses 3 times in one day, you know?
Yeah, but that's another thing that, let's be clear, with all the tendencies to hallucinate, and if we even consider what is used to train models, it is not bulletproof, so the problems appear. And yes, the speed of creating new code and new software speed is increasing, but it doesn't mean that our ability to understand what's going on and just get a grasp of this complexity is improving, which means more and more problems. And I even saw some studies, I won't quote sources right now, that 2025 was the first year in over a decade when the amount of manual toil work increased. It was year over year, it was decreasing, but in last year it was over 30%, which was the first year in over a decade when year to year the amount of toil work in the software department increased in the time when the agile where AI was supposed to automate everything. So is it that improving, or we're just pretending that it is? Also, let's look at last, I don't know, 4 to 5 months. Pretty much every big tech had some incident. Microsoft, I'm not talking about the Windows upgrades, but Azure had a total mess with their front end. Basically, they messed up configuration of their front router. Google had some issues with deleting files from their buckets, and also something with router. Cloudflare had 2 or 3 incidents, 3 weeks, one after another. AWS had a famous situation. What was that? I think the last time it was DynamoDB messing Route 53, but I'm not sure. Maybe I'm confusing the incident. And pretty much every big player had an incident that was huge. And personally, I wouldn't say that smaller companies didn't have them. I would just say that I would assume that more likely they just didn't get to headlines. I know that organization where I worked had some issues.
Yeah. No, that's actually good. I'm glad you went through all those because yeah, No one's immune. No one's immune from that. There have been a lot. If you think back the past 6 months or so, even longer. Okay, interesting. I had another vein I wanted to kind of follow up on with you with, because I saw that you kind of had a bunch of different things here, and this one really struck a chord with me because I've literally just had a conversation with a client of mine recently. It's in this idea of technical debt. You kind of hear this from time to time. I had never heard of this term when I first started out in this business. I really didn't know what I was getting into, to be honest. But then the longer I was in it, I heard this term technical debt, and I was like, "What the heck is that?" And obviously, it's when you just have a bunch of different tools or different things that really don't get used because you needed them at one point. You move on, you forget about stuff. You kind of have this whole web of all these different things. Now, I just got off a call this morning with a client of mine who's a CEO of a business, and I was kind of having this conversation. I was kind of having this of like, hey, we built this tool for you, but it also in the past couple of years we've built it to kind of, it was patchwork of like, hey, we want this feature now, we want this, we want to change this, we want to do this, and we took a step back, and honestly, and this is partly on me as well, but there was kind of some accumulation of like, man, we got a lot of stuff in here that's just kind of like junky. Like we really should kind of change some stuff. So how do you, but it's different explaining this idea of technical debt, so to speak, to a developer versus a C-level, like a CEO type of person, right? They just speak different languages usually. So I'm curious, like, how do you explain that to someone at that level? Maybe at least I can learn something, if not the
So
audience as well.
in Paradox, I find it easier to explain it to business people or C-level than to have a consistent definition and agreement what technical debt is with the engineers, because, like you mentioned, it's very commonly, very frequently repeated. But if you start digging into what it really is or how to really measure it, it's becoming problematic because it's very fuzzy there. But the concept itself is actually quite easy. And what I like to do is I compare it to financial debt. Basically, as an organization, you do take some credits to speed up the growth of your organization. You can use your credit card, take some credit from the bank or whatever, and now you have a choice. You might take these credits to, I don't know, buy a new coffee machine to every kitchen in the office. That's consumption debt. Maybe not the wisest thing to do, but I'm not judging. But you can take a credit to, I don't know, increase your production power. I don't know, speed up investment in some new product, modernize your tools, your machines in the factory, and so on. That speeds up the growth of the organization, and that's strategical finance, which might is most likely smarter, but in both cases you will need to pay it back. One thing, you will need to pay the debt itself. Second, the interest. And you need to track it to know how much interest you need to pay every month. If you go too heavy on the debt, then everything you earn will go to pay back the debt, and the company wouldn't, in best case, wouldn't grow, most likely wouldn't survive. Technical debt works at the end of the day pretty much the same. How it's created, it's more or less the effect of taking shortcuts or not cleaning up everything what we do. Maybe something was hard-coded, maybe sometimes we decided to copy a piece of code to another place instead of doing refactoring to avoid repetition. Never mind, let's not dive into technicalities. But the moment you do this, you make, as the name suggests, debt that you will need to pay back. It won't be on the financial level, so it's much harder to track. but the payment of the interest will be in the speed of your engineers. And again, sometimes taking this debt is the smartest thing you can do because it allows you to push new feature to the market faster, validate it, and so on. Sometimes it is just laziness of engineers or short seeing from the management. Sources of that can be different, and that's a little bit like consumption debt, which is not good. But at the end of the day, if you don't track it, if you don't pay it back in timely fashion, at some point, all the engineering teams will be paying it back, and suddenly adding, I don't know, a new checkbox on the website. Instead of taking 10 minutes, will take 3 days because we are afraid what could be destroyed, broken just because you added some parameter. This gradual slowing down of the development speed, that's the interest from the technical debt, and that's what you should be afraid of.
No, go ahead.
I hope it helps.
That was good. Yeah, that is. I was just going to say that's probably the most clear breakdown of it I've ever heard. That was very, very well done. I really like the analogy there. Interesting. Yeah, and it's because the way you tied in interest with it is also it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense because in our minds as a developer, you're thinking, oh, I'm just copy and pasting this because it's helping me move faster. It's actually it's a good investment. It's a good way to do that. But like you said, in those small ways, it can add up and it can slow things down eventually. Yeah,
that's why it's called debt. It's surprisingly similar concept actually.
interesting.
But
Yeah, I mean,
like I said, much harder to track. I don't know if you had some experience or ideas how to track it. I would be happy to maybe adopt something in my.
Yeah, that sounds like a very interesting idea out there for somebody listening, maybe that would be interested in some kind of way to help companies track that. Would be pretty interesting idea. I don't know how you would quantify it, but if you could find a way to do that, who knows? Who knows? Very interesting. Okay. All right. Well, let's get ready to wrap things up here in a couple of minutes. Why don't you take a couple of minutes here and just tell us? I know you're an author. You have some books. Where can we go to find a little bit more about you or engage further with the things you talk about?
The standard answer: yes, I am an author. I need to warn you that you can find totally different kinds of work I do. From satire to some systemic thinking. But everything I do, you can find on my website, adamkorga.com. There's a blog to see a little bit better insight into twisted ways I think. You have some newsletter. You have links how to contact me. I'm super happy to always answer. But most importantly, you also have information about my book. And here, risking that I'm going into marketing, sorry for that, but one is IT Dictionary, which is pure satire about the meta commentary about how the IT industry works. Second, F Almanac, which is, well, I won't use the full title, which is literally study of those biggest disasters in IT industry, but analyzed in a way that on one hand won't be hopefully that boring, on the other hand would help understand how this everything works and why it breaks.
That sounds awesome. The satire thing sounds so amazing to me. I would love. I have not checked that out yet. I will definitely dive into that. I love things like that. That sounds really, really cool.
I would say I think it's great, but come on, I'm not objective by definition, so you need to check.
Yeah.
But there are some previews also on Amazon, so feel free to check.
Awesome. We will do. So yeah, you guys can check that out. AdamKorga.com. It's spelled Korga. And we'll have the link for you, obviously, in the show notes as well, as always. So awesome. This was really insightful, very interesting conversation. I wish we had a little time to go a little bit more. Unfortunately, we got to wrap this up. I have other things we need to get going on with. I'm sure you're a very busy man as well. No, this was really, really awesome. I really appreciate your time and thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me, and well, it was great conversation from my end as well. So again, thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, guys. That was Adam Korga. And you can definitely check out, I highly recommend you check out all that stuff that he has mentioned over at adamkorga.com. Again, we'll have all the links for you down below here. So, hope you got some insight from this show from Adam as well. And as always, please be sure to share, like, and subscribe to the show. We always appreciate that. That is very, very helpful. So, that is going to wrap up this episode. I'm Dan Hafner, and we'll talk next time. See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to Tech Bites, your go-to show for software business and technology. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated with our latest episodes, insights, and stories. Hungry for more? Dive deeper into the world of no-code by visiting dapanacode.com. Your journey to building amazing software without coding skills starts there. Connect with like-minded creators and unlock a world of resources tailored just for you. Subscribe now. Explore Dapper No Code and let's innovate together.